Hello guys, Chris here and welcome to episode 7 of the Pocket Podcast. Today we have a very exciting guest, probably the most exciting yet. It's Mr. Simon Beard, the founder of Culture Kings, which valued at over $600 million. He exited and got $300 million in cash and $300 million in shares. We talk about his journey, the tough times, the things that make it special. It was such an amazing conversation. This guy is honestly a genius. I am so inspired by him. I'm so inspired by his story, and I think you guys will be too. So without further ado, we're going to dive right into his story, and we're going to dive right into this conversation. Let's get into the show. Now, before we get into the episode with Simon, I want to take a minute to thank our sponsors of the podcast, Switch Nutrition. And more specifically, I want to talk about these two products that I'm holding in my hand right now. These are my favorite products that I take every single day, one at night and one in the morning. The Adrenal Switch is the ultimate sleep formula. I take this thing every single night, 30 minutes before bed, and I sleep like a baby. It's filled with 3 main compounds, ashwagandha, zinc, and magnesium, which are all essential to help you wind down. To be honest, I've tried so many sleep formulas and they never seem to work. So when I sat down with the team at Switch, I asked them why that was, and they said the main reason was the dosages that are in all of their competitors a lot of the time aren't enough to make an impact. And with Switch, you do not need to worry about that. The Adrenal Switch is honestly my favorite. I've been taking it for years now. Every single night, 30 minutes before bed, you'll sleep like a baby. And of course, the second supplement that I love from Switch is their brand new supplement called Hydrate. You see, people seem to think that water is enough to stay hydrated, but the reality is it's not. You need the sodium, potassium, and magnesium, which you find in this Hydrate supplement, to actually keep you hydrated amongst the water that you are drinking. So every single morning, I put one of these sachets in 500 to 700 ml of water and I drink it straight away, getting me ready to go for the day to make sure I am hydrated and fully equipped to attack the day's activities. If you want to try the 2 supplements that I take daily by Switch, the Adrenal and the Hydrate, you can go to switchnutrition.com.au and you can use the code Griffin at checkout to get 20% off. Alternatively, click the link in the description or the show notes below and you'll be able to go straight to switchnutrition.com.au. And once again, use Griffin at checkout to get 20% off. This thing on my wrist is a Whoop. Now, if you saw in the conversation, you would have noticed that not only am I wearing a Whoop, but Simon Beard is also wearing a Whoop. And that is because it is the ultimate health and fitness tracker. It has been an absolute game changer when it comes to achieving my health and fitness goals. There are so many benefits about the Whoop, but one of my favorite ones is the sleep coach. As we all know, it is so important to get a good night's sleep, and Whoop tracks my sleep and gives me a score based on how well I performed, and it also gives me metrics such as how much deep and REM sleep I got, how many times I woke up throughout the night, and all of these metrics contribute to how well recovered I am to attack the next day's activities. I love this thing, and I'm sure Simon does too, hence why he's wearing one in this episode and why he wears one every single day. If you want to give Whoop a try, they've been kind enough to give all the listeners of the Pocket Podcast a free band and a free month if you go to join.whoop.com/Chris or hit the link in the description or in the show notes below, and you can get a Whoop and a free month completely free. Once again, that is join.whoop.com/Chris or hit the link in the description below to get yourself a free Whoop. I am so excited for you guys to listen to this podcast episode with Simon Beard, the founder of Culture Kings and many, many more. So without further ado, let's get into the conversation with Simon. Simon, before the show, I got you to write down a quote for me, something that you love, something that came to mind straight away. And out of all the quotes you wrote, happiness is being challenged, but on top of things. I'm so intrigued by that quote and what that means to you.
I just think it's so important that people don't get afraid of the challenge, because that is actually the fun. That is actually the happiness, is that balance, that knife edge of being challenged. Like you get that feeling, but you come out on top. And I think it's so important that, people don't think this happiness is getting to this point and, it's cocktails on the beach or anything, because I've definitely hit that moment where I could, do that for the rest of my life if I wanted to. But I was always preaching this quote to my team the whole way on the journey, is like, we live on that edge. Like we push ourselves, and when we get that feeling, that's where we know we're alive and we're living. But when you pull off those wins, and look, sometimes you can go a bit past it and be a bit too challenged, and you can run the red line a bit, but you can pull it back. It's that sweet spot. And I think it's so important that I'm always trying to push that in pretty much everything that I do. I want to always be on that edge and in that groove.
It's one of those things where you got to have a goal so you know where you're going to, but it's that pursuit of the goal that brings the enjoyment, brings the happiness. Happiness is such an interesting thing, though. It's, Iman Gaji talks about this it's a trifecta of peace, joy, and fulfillment.
Yeah.
And he says, like, it's a lot of the time the goal's not actually to be happy. It's not about happiness.
Yeah.
Because if you're running a company and you're the CEO, you can't be at peace because there's so much going on. But if what fulfills you is running a company, then you have to run the company or else you're not going to be fulfilled. So it's an interesting battle where people kind of paint this thing around the goal is, I just want to be happy. But when you actually break it down, it's interesting because is it actually happiness is the goal? But yeah, that journey is so important. And I'm getting reminded more and more about, like enjoying that. And it gets to a point when you've been slammed on your face so many times, those challenges become laughable and you kind of laugh.
Yeah.
On that journey, like the challenges for you, is there any key ones that stand out that you were just like, this is really testing me? Maybe I'm getting to that red line, as you said just before.
There's a lot of times throughout that journey, we built Culture Kings. It was just at the markets. And I remember thinking the red line of, oh my God, they're putting the rent up $5. How am I going to pay it? It was that same.
It's all relative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That level of growth that required to stretch. And I think you made a great point. Like, happiness is not the goal. I just use that word because it's so commonly used in the part. But I define what a lot of people say as happiness is just a positive emotion. But there's ranges of positive emotions. I'm always like, high energy positive emotions, like being determined or passionate, are so important that I believe some people don't push them enough. Like determined, that level, like where you could run through a fucking wall, that level of intensity. Or the other side, low energy positive emotions, appreciation, gratitude. I did a lot of work with this coach, it's neuroscientist Alan Watkins, and it was such a game changer in understanding that chemistry and defining these emotional states needed in business. And I know when I did that, it was revolutionary for me. And on that journey, I remember as we went back, those levels of growth, I went from the markets being sweating bullets down here at Carrara Markets every weekend, paying $30 rent, bootstrapped our way up. I remember when I first met Alan Watkins, we were doing about $30 million. And you would think like, okay, I went from at the markets, a straight out carny, to I've got a $30 million business here. You'd think your emotional set point, your happiness over that time would have increased. And I said it was exactly the same spot, because yes, I could get passionate and determined, but at the same time I'd get frustrated and pissed off, and I'd sort of end in the middle there. And only when I went through this with Alan and I could really define these emotions and practice utilizing them. And I would do this chart thing. I always give it out to everyone on my socials and
Gave
stuff.
that recently.
Yeah. I always get trying people to use it because it was like such a game changer to me of resetting before a meeting. What state you want to be into is just visualizing it. And then I would train myself to go into those states. And I went from, not only did I go from a $30 million business to, turning over 300 million, but my emotional set point changed so dramatically. And I think that was so important. And going through those journeys is realizing like stuff breaks, like the problems are part of the journey, but just the simple, where so many people can go to the dead dog, I say, oh, this always happens to me, the low energy give up state. Oh, this is not fair. It's the government or something, is to shift into a determined, like, no, I'm going to use this. I'm going to add even more energy, more intensity, more, and just that little shift. I've always tried to ingrain that in the team and stuff too, because if they can just recognize that, that stuff breaking, those problems, that's all just part of the journey. But as long as you bring it with more intensity, more energy, more certainty to it, you solve them, and then you get this next level of growth, and then something else will break. And that was because ours was a very slow journey. We bootstrapped it. We never got any loans. So we're always just, we only could open a store when we had enough money to put into it. And in doing this, we had to, we couldn't hire this dream team out the gate. We had to start with people and we had to train them step by step. We had to get people, very at their junior point, starting in their career, and learn that along the way from that journey. And I think that was so valuable because we got through each one of those levels of growth and built that muscle slowly, but certainly along it. Because I've seen some of these other founders and stuff where I'm talking with, and, when they've raised a ton of money and they've sort of got, where I'm like, oh, I worry is like, is the muscle built underneath that? And sometimes it can work because just the model's so great and they've got such a tailwind and it can just connect. But I know for us, it was it doesn't sound that slow, but it felt very slow, 12 years or 14 years till now, but 12 years till the exit sort of thing. It was a big, long journey.
It's funny when you look at the 12 years, it seems like a lot in the modern day, right? But then obviously at a 600 mil val with the exit, like it's pretty good time spent, I guess. Yeah. You spoke about, I just want to bring it back to when you were talking about the emotions and how acting on emotions. Do you think a massive skill you could have being a leader and being a CEO or even just an entrepreneur as a whole, right, is not being able to, like, the ability to not ride the emotional roller coaster throughout the day, and recognizing that the conversation, you're going to have 5 different conversations with different people in a day, where you're going to have to speak to your employees, then you're going to have to speak to, well, not in your case, investors, but you're going to have to speak to business partners, or you've then got to speak to your suppliers. You've then got to speak to your customers, and then you've then got to you go home and speak to your partner and your wife. Obviously that was combined with you as well. And then you've got your kids and everything, and you've got to basically close one door out of a conversation and open another one. It's like, I remember when I had my first software startup and I raised some money prematurely. I didn't have product market fit. It was a massive lesson. I was 17. But I raised this money, and I remember having to, I would have a cleaner out on the road. It was a combination of service and software, and I had to clean out on the road, and then I'd get a client call me saying that they didn't do the job properly, and I'd have to send them out, and then would be running at a loss. And then I'd have to go to the investors and say everything's fine. And recognizing the lesson I learned from that was being able to take a big breath after something shit has happened, and then go, okay, it's all good, and move into another thing and act like everything is all good. Do you think there was a level of pressure for you, especially seeing you didn't raise money, and, even when you had months where it might have been in the red, but Monday's your employee's favorite day because it's payday and you're like, I'm at a loss. Was there a lot of pressure from you and your wife heading up that company, as it kept scaling and as it kept growing?
Definitely. And I always talk this of entrepreneurs, of that pressure never went away. Like it's this pressure on your neck and I always thought, once you get to a certain level of turnover, once you get to 50 million or once you get to 100, it's going to go. But it didn't. And even more so, I remember waking up even before the deal, like I was just like, I just want it to go through because, waking up and, you're checking all the dashboards like, oh my God, the wage bill is $500,000 this week. And it's only when we got that money outside the business did that pressure really actually release. I always say this, I've never slept better than once that did, because you had to deal with that emotional state and the natural fear that would always come just because the problems, the bigger you get, the bigger the problems, like $1 million mistakes, not just made by you, but by employees, and not reacting in that way. Because I remember, like, I've done all those mistakes. I remember, blasting a software developer once, thinking like, they're not doing the work. And then all I did was the guy just took the piss for the next 4 months and basically didn't do anything. Would just have the code up on their screen and basically be listening or, probably playing Warcraft, some game or something. And it's like, it was this thing, as I learned at the end of the day, and they could always get another job and you had to pay another recruiter. And it was a skill that I never had. I didn't know what it was, but it was like, it really taught me the lesson is like, you have to inspire and ignite people to work on your team. They can choose anywhere in the world to work. You have to take anyone that chooses to join your team. Like, you have to come from that frame of like, I am grateful and appreciative that they've showed up, and not from this, I think that can come from this boss thing is like, I'm paying you, especially, I get that thing when you're paying them and you're losing money. I remember the thing is, we were paying so much of that time we were paying staff more than we were getting paid, and we weren't only taking a small salary, rolling the dividend every time into the next project. But it was that reference that you had to step back and realize just emotional regulation was so important. And that one of the things is the leader, as the CEO, if you show that fear, it like 10x's the way down that organization. If you let that creep in, that uncertainty, that like your team will show it 5 times, and then the team below that will show it 10 times. It's just crazy how it ripples effects through. And so my part was, in a lot of part, I'd always on my morning routine and the discipline and to put myself into the and build that certainty, because it was a big sales technique that I learned in sales at the markets, but it was so important in leadership, is that when two people meet, as long as there's rapport, a feeling of connection, whoever has more certainty influences the other person. And that's how I could sell stuff. But then I realized like I had to sell the team every day on the vision, on why we're doing something, on why this is going to work, on why this is worth putting in the extra effort, of why we can beat all the dinosaur retailers and stuff out there. That was all that emotional regulation at its core, and choosing those states that I needed to go to, and just being super careful that, you would always, especially when big stuff broke or something, to swing back into those negative states, but just realizing from early on just how damaging they can be, and just getting myself out of that environment, simply stopping, resetting, and coming back in with that more energy to solve it was such a game changer.
That leadership point is just, I feel like a lot of people don't truly understand the responsibility a leader of a big business has. There was a great podcast I was listening to. Stephen Bartlett was on it as well, and they were talking about like how Drake, for example, can't walk any street without getting swamped. He can't live a normal life. There'd be so much pressure on Drake, and in exchange, he makes all of this money. And then the comparison they used was, but then you've got Ben Francis from Gymshark, who is making all of this money, but he can walk the street without security. And they were talking about a comparison, and they said, would you rather live Drake's life where he can do whatever he wants, where he can't really do a lot what he wants in public, or Ben Francis's life? And people were saying that they'd prefer Ben's because it's quiet. And then Stephen Bartlett goes, you don't understand. His mind's not quiet. He like the ability for him to be present. And then it comes back down to all those things you were just stating is if he makes the wrong face and he shows that he's worried, that funnels down to his thousands of employees and everyone sees that because the leader is showing a sign of weakness. But then he's like, okay, I've got to grow a family and I've got to have a different conversation here. I've got these investors. We're going to try and publicly list this company. Like, they don't understand the pressure that comes down to running big businesses, and you've shown that just in a few things that you just said. I really want to talk about the actual store and the vibe that you've created. You spoke a lot about people. I hear you say time and time again about how important it is to train your people and make them feel special, make them feel like they're at the right job, make them really love going into work. And that's a battle. I feel like a lot of founders' challenge is their ability to actually let go, knowing that someone may not do a better job. They can do a better job than the other people.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was young, the Pack Fair store specifically is the one that stands out to me as I was growing up. And when that opened, you created this insane hype where there's lines out the doors. I didn't really understand what was going on. But then you also had this polarity of there was some people that just hated the stores. They thought it was like the weirdest thing, cringy things to go to. Maybe that was more of like the surfer vibe community, and which were some of my friends. And then you'd have some friends that would absolutely love it, and they would wait to line up in your stores just so they could spend over a threshold to get this robe that you gave them. And I was so amazed at this dichotomy of emotions that people would feel about your brand, but it worked. What are the key contributing factors to you pulling off that at a store level and making this exclusive? And if you're a part of it, it's special. I want to wear that Culture Kings robe. And when I get it, I get the shoes as well. It's like I'm in a hotel, but I'm doing it at home.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many things that go into play, but talk to me about the main contributing factors to that succeeding and giving off that vibe at a store level.
So the stores were always consciously built. Like, I believe a lot of businesses, if you try to sell to everyone, you sell to no one. And I was always used to rip on Maya and David Jones to my team of like, look at this. They just try and sell all this random and they don't appeal to anyone. If David Jones went broke tomorrow, no one will be like, oh, my favorite store. Like, no one cares because they don't create real raving fans. And I think what we narrowed down to early on is, a big part why I started this streetwear part is that I hated the surf community, right? The surf clothes. Like, I hated the Billabong or this, and always would see, and I'm just like, I loved this streetwear side. I first saw it in Japan, and then, as it was coming through America, I just love this part of streetwear. It could just bounce between all these different things of street sport, music, fashion. It had this take from luxury and pull it down with this sort of FU attitude. That's what I loved. Like, great examples of the early days was the Crooks and Castles shirt, which had the Versace logo with the bandana over it. And it was this thing that was sort of like, it was like a Versace shirt, but it was like a FU at Versace. And I just loved the passionate streetwear. And then from all our sort of stores, I started, from the markets and our first ones and all the way up to that Pack Fair one was about, well, how do we create this feeling, this emotion? Because that's what I learned at the markets. People weren't buying the product, they were buying this feeling, this emotion. We need to create it. And what I wanted Culture Kings to sit is that I wanted it to be the first store you went to without your parents, right? So as much as you had these stores like the City Beach or something, it was all people were always shopping there with their parents, and it was sort of trying to appeal to the mass market, everyone, where I wanted the music, right, to be loud. And I'd always get this from my mum and stuff like, oh, you know, Aunt Joe went in there and said the music's so loud in the store. I'll just be like,
supposed to
get the fuck yeah. You know, because it was designed to sort of to repel them, because no one's actually going to love your brand unless people hate it, right? And that's sometimes some people are a bit scared to do when they sit this lukewarm on the fence. And this is where when you to call a niche, you actually have to exclude some people. And that is what we wanted to do and create this vibe, this environment that I always pictured as like when that kid gets dropped off at Pack Fair the first time without his parents, you know, 14, 15, he's got that 50, that $100, he just beelines straight to Culture Kings. That's what I wanted to create.
That's what it did, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And create all that theater, that show, that feeling that people wanted to be a part of it. And then, yeah, our not for sale product was about, I really studied a lot of luxury, you know, LVMH, Hermes and stuff. And this was this not for sale product you couldn't buy, but this limited and create this feeling to it. And then to be able to drive the average order value up in store to get people to spend more. Because I was always about, well, how do we sell the whole outfit rather than go to here and this shop and this shop? I just wanted to create that true raving fan and sell the whole lot. And I think I really pulled this together from my own male experiences. We don't go shopping every weekend, and shopping's not as much the entertainment factor like girls go from one to one just talking all day. You know, it's all part of the experience. Where I wanted it to be is that when a guy went shopping, that we would create this environment, this state, and through the sales technique that the guy just goes, I'm doing the whole winter right now. You know, I'm going to buy the 2 hoodies, the jackets, the thing. I'm going to spend $500. I'm going to spend $1,000, and to create that environment. And then in doing so, you connect a real raving fan that when they would go back, they're going to get hit with the ad. They're going to shop again online. You've built a true experience and feeling. I always wanted our stores to stand out. Like if someone went and walked around Pack Fair, I wanted to, if you just random, what's one thing you remembered about today? I remember that Culture King shop, they were shooting the basketball or doing this thing or that, you know, that stood out in their mind. So that's where a lot of all that came to create it and define our customer, which was still pretty broad, like street sport, music, fashion, and how I always believe streetwear is like a great open format DJ. It's not what song you play, it's how you play it. And so that's what we would always try and do is, that's what I would always try to do and create that magic.
Yeah, as you're saying all of this, I just remember like going in the stores as a youngster and, you know, that whole increasing the average order value and going like, okay, we're at $340, but we want the exclusive, little package that we get at $400. So we're strangling around the store trying to find something. But then through that process, you spend more time in the store, getting a feel for it. You end up buying more stuff. So when you go home, you've got a more collection of the Culture King stuff. Yeah. And then through that, you literally have this closer connection to the store. Like I remember the main thing I kept buying from your stores was the AS Color tee. It's just a plain tee at like a 5 for $100 or something like that. Yeah. And you'd just buy these shirts all the time, and you'd go in, there's just a plain shirt, but it's Culture Kings, and that's where you got it from.
Yeah.
And I get so fascinated by that creation. And on that journey, you know, we spoke about journey and market store. I've sold books at Carrara markets before as well. I remember selling some luxury limited edition Liverpool FC books and stuff like that. They had 1,000 copies in the world. And I remember I was going down to the markets and selling, and that's where my sales first started when I was like 16. Yeah. But yeah, I remember going through that. But when did you get to a point where you're like, okay, this is getting bigger than a market stall. Let's take it to that next level?
I always wanted to expand out of the market. So a lot of people think like, oh, I'd been there for 7 years. So since I was
Right.
17 till I was 24, so all these different consumer electronics. And only when I caught this, and I would have tried and failed at least 6 different businesses that I tried to start during the week, and they all failed. But just my weekend selling at the markets would sort of always cover me and make the money back. But only when I cracked the streetwear was I like, okay, this I really get this feeling in my gut can be big. Like I really see this opportunity, and I was desperate to get out of the markets too, because I was getting so much pressure from my parents and just even my friends, sort of, because it was like my identity was the carny, right? I'd been at the market since I was 17. Now I'm like 24, and I'd started to get those, sniggers from my parents, how long are you going to be just at the markets for? Are you just going to be a market,
Were you making much money at the markets?
Like, a few grand a week, and it would ebb and flow, sometimes a bit more.
If it was raining, you were done for.
Exactly. That's part of it. But,
yeah,
I was definitely, and I remember actually this moment, you got to look out for these triggers. And this is why I say is like when you get these moments to grab that more energy. I remember my dad made this comment once when I came home, and he goes, I bet you if you added up all the hours you spend there, it wouldn't even be $10 an hour. And it was just like, one of those jabs that just ignited a fire. And I remember I went to that markets that next day, and it was like I'd unleashed the fucking beast in me. I was spruiking. I was selling more than ever. I remember my previous record before that was about 24 cameras. I did like 55 that day. So I more than doubled my biggest record and came back with, a few $1,000s. And I remember I walked back in and I just slammed down all the cash in front of him. And I was just like $10 an hour, hey? And I remember it was this bit of like, snigger, but I remember that inside me is like, I actually really grateful he gave me that poke. I needed that like, poke of to grow. And this is where I use that story and trying to train some of the staff too, is when stuff's not doing it, like we have this natural male instinct to respond to challenge like that. And that sometimes I'll try and poke that challenge because it can just ignite this level of energy.
Do you feel like using that wanting to prove someone wrong fuel is a really powerful fuel to use as the first part of that question? The second part, would it be, do you think there's a time where you're using it too much or you've taken it too far? And is there a line, finding that fine line of using it as a really powerful fuel to slingshot you forward, but then equally recognizing that it's not sustainable and being able to find something else to drive you?
One of the biggest things is knowing that, like, yes, you can launch into this passion, determination, but it's got to ebb and flow, and you have to balance it with that right recovery and that actual shifting. And this is where I think so many people get it wrong, where they think, oh, I need to relax, I need to mong out, I need to scroll on TikTok for 2 hours or watch TV. It's like, that's not recovery. That's like messing up your dopamine. You actually need to totally detox to actually, and this is meditate to, I'm huge on all the other recovery, the sauna, the cold plunge, the steam, but no devices, no phone, completely eliminate the dopamine and actually train your body into that relaxation state and that calmness and that stillness. That's how you recover. And once you're there, that slingshots you back when you're working again. And I think that's what I always refer to as the flow state, is that ebbs and flows of like that intense and then backing it back off. And then not doing, I learned this as well early, is don't do today what you can't recover from tomorrow. So it is all this thing, as much as you get on this heater and you can work all night, but then you just cook the next day. And how to get that right balance of ebbs and flow, and definitely like that determination. Some people can think they're determined, but they're just pissed off and frustrated. It's such a balance between that negative and positive emotion, because that's to be able to define it and understand where you are, is so important in leadership and business. And
calm in the chaos.
Yeah.
Right? And just stoic.
Yeah.
I think even things like ice baths and that teach you that, to be calm in the chaos.
Yeah.
But it's a good principle. I mean, like learning a lot of how the Stoics and reading like Marcus Aurelius and Meditations and Ryan Holiday. And I find, I've read a lot of different books, but I really find those ones, because business books are great, but the best, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but the best way you learn business is by doing, and by actually doing the things that you need to do, right? And through that action is where you benefit.
Yeah.
But I really find learning from, ancient scripts and different things that people have been doing for decades, centuries, to stay calm, remain calm in the chaos. And I think the ability to be stoic is such a attractive trait, I guess, to have. And yeah, doing things like you said, like the recoveries, like the meditation, all of that's just training you to be equipped to be able to be calm in that chaos. Do you think that's a really important skill set to have?
100%. And I love the stoic line. I've always used it when I wake up in the morning, as that alarm at like the 4 o'clock or the 5 o'clock and you don't want to get up. It's this carry water, chop wood. I'd always sort of say it, but it's this analogy of you've got to do the work, and no matter what it is, there's these points where you've just got to not get distracted. It's not about and this is a huge part in business, is sometimes you've got to do stuff that's not as fun.
Red light tasks.
Yeah, but it's and I got it from Ryan Holiday, and he had it so this coach of this NFL team, and they would use it. But it's this thing of that understanding that as much as the NFL, it's a job, right? And they needed that in the training, is the carry water, chop wood, is that you're just doing your task and you're focused on it and you're not getting distracted, and that it has to be done and you understand it. And that was, I would always use it when I first woke up, or, sometimes too when I was in those meetings or something that were not as, and I was feeling that dopamine wanting to pull me, to check social or check something or pull away to the easy, cheap dopamine, is to realign myself back, is carry water, chop wood. Like, I'm going to stay in this meeting. We're going to get the outcome. We're going to come up with the campaign. We're going to execute it and just follow it. Because this is the thing of not getting distracted with
shiny object syndrome.
Yeah, which happens to all us entrepreneurs. I know for me, that was at the markets. I was always starting this different businesses and failing. But when I nailed that focus on Culture Kings, it was
starts to take off.
Yeah.
I see that happen in my life, and we all go through it, right? Yeah. I feel like as entrepreneurs, you have this default yes. And I don't know, it's one of those things where shiny object syndrome, especially when you're in the spotlight and you have social media in place, all these things come up. And when you're not so clear on where you want to go and how you're trying to get there and the main things that you're focusing on, it's so easy when the times get tough for something to arise and you go, yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. Let's do that. It's a good reminder, an activity that I did recently, late last year, because I found myself going in too many directions. I was starting too many different things, and I stripped back and I got really clear again on where I actually want to be. And then I wrote down all the main priorities in my life and all the things I'm working on, and I listed them from 1 to 10. And I just crossed out the bottom 5 to scrap all of them. I circled the top one and I said, I just want to go all in on that and keep the other 2, 3, 4, and 5 at a maintenance, and get rid of all the rest, and then change my profile, my cover photo on my phone to say no.
Yeah, wow.
and then just focus on it. And it's crazy. And the 2 things that I wanted to focus on were my podcast and my new AI startup. And And by doing so and having those things in place and knowing that whenever something came into my line, I can check, I was like, okay, is it getting closer to where I want to be or where I don't want to be? And if that answer is there, then do it. If it's there, then don't do it. I just found this power. Everything started to progress in my life. And it just goes to show that when you can focus on all, as Gary Keller with the one thing, like that book is so amazing because like it just reminds you of when you actually focus on something that matters, it's when the needle starts to move and when you start to get some crazy, amazing results in your life.
Yeah. You've got to get that flywheel spinning, and it's
the momentum on that one thing, because it's hard to get momentum on all these things, but when you have one, being able to stick at it. Yeah.
So easy to lose momentum on those other things when you just let it go for a few days or weeks or
So you've exited Culture Kings now.
Yeah.
And obviously the sale's public. Everyone kind of knows about it, but you did a deal where it was shares and cash, and what the cash was half of that, 300 million in cash. Big milestone. You know, you said 12 years of working at it. You mentioned that sleep that night when the cash came in the bank was a very good one because of that stress, being able to say, I can actually have a breath and take a breath. Milestones are an interesting thing as entrepreneurs. And, you know, it's that whole thing around you climb one mountain and then you look up and you just see another big one. When you got that sale, did you have this feeling of my job's done? Or did you have a feeling of, okay, we need to keep going and on to the next thing? What was that feeling? Or was there a little honeymoon period and then you were back into it? Or what was that for you?
Well, because I was still, as much as the deal happened and we got that 300 mil, we were in the build up to IPO. So part of the deal was half cash and then we were IPOing on the New York Stock Exchange. So we didn't really have a breath or a break through that period. And I didn't want to touch the money as well, because one of the things is the second that dropped, it was immediately like people came from every angle with every sort of investment possible. And some of them I wish I did, but but I was just like, I'm just going to say no and just focus on this. Let's get the IPO away. And, which was so like close to being this absolute home run, in that we, you know, we'd pre-sold all the shares, we'd sold it all, you know, at however much. And I remember calculating my stake, you know, was, huge, like over 500 million US in just the shares. And I'm like calculating on paper. I'm like, oh my God, am I going to be like a billionaire or I'm going to be a billionaire like really soon? Like, and thinking, you know, you just be an idiot. Like what I did, I went and like programmed all the Sonos and stuff to play Jay-Z, a Billy, like as soon as the share price hit a certain thing. And I remember going for a run like right before the IPO, you know, and I was just like, oh my God, this is it, sort of made it. Anyway, the IPO supposed to go on Wednesday. Monday, the SPAC market collapsed. We had to lower at a certain price. No one sold any shares down. Anyway, it went back up, but then fell a lot. And those shares went from being worth, you know, fell like 90%. And I remember seeing that, waking up every day, checking that share price, going like, oh my God, like I just lost $30 million last night. And it was the worst thing, because I just kept checking it constantly and seeing that red. And then it was this, for me, it was this feeling of like, this is so messed up, is that I deliberately structured this deal in this way, is that I wanted to get half the money off the table. Then if it went to the moon or went to the zero, it wouldn't make a difference to my life. You know, like I've got this outside of the business, but then why am I getting so like my emotions jumping all over the place and stuff over this? And that's when, you know, going through the whole, you know, private equity, majority owned, and then we were like public company. I really didn't like the corporate nature of it. I am very much an entrepreneur and love to take action and move fast, and it wasn't the right environment for me. And it is an important thing to remember, I think, for entrepreneurs that do sell in those things is when you sell the majority, you're not an entrepreneur anymore. You're an employee. And for me, it was like I always had this goal of mine as I wrote down in grade 10. I never wanted to work a job in my whole life. I wanted to be an entrepreneur my whole life. And I was like, what am I doing? So that's when I decided to step away, from the day to day. I've still got my shares and everything and cheer as much as I can from the sidelines. But for me, I wanted to go on this next journey of helping other entrepreneurs build, especially e-commerce retail. It is so much faster and easier and smaller team than ever, the opportunity that's now to build these brands. If you niche it down, you pick a market, you can run so lean, so tight and get this flywheel to spin. I love that. And I love the entrepreneur and the little guy having a crack, not the corporate thing. I always had that at Culture Kings is in my morning stand-ups every day. I was always throwing shade at the corporate, bloody, the Foot Lockers or whatever, going, these guys just take a shoe out of the box and put it on the wall, hope it will sell. We're going to eat their lunch every day. Like, we're going to show them how to do it. We're going to write the playbook on this new age of retail. And I just sort of felt like when all that sort of corporate stuff, it lost my identity. Has always sort of, I sometimes say, a bit of a carny at heart, and that I love just that grassroots entrepreneurship. Even one of the videos I did, I went and helped the guy sell at the markets, and I was like, oh my God, I just loved it so much. I was telling Tanya, I'm like, I just love that feeling of connecting product market fit and seeing for those entrepreneurs what's possible and how you can create. I truly reckon you can create all these niches that you can target this market and build that feedback loop, and you can build a $50 million e-commerce business now with like 5 or 6 people. Like, it is, when we first did e-commerce, I remember, City Beach spent $1 million on their Magento website. I could build that now in half an hour, and a website that would be 10 times better. Like, that is the opportunity that's right now. And I think that's what so it was amazing going through the process, and I learned so much through the process and doing it. And I always did want to, the entrepreneur in me as well, always dreamt about some part of that exit part was always such a milestone in a journey for an entrepreneur. And it was great because, we got to, get that money off the table. It's all house money. Just let it ride. I'm not selling it, even though it's 90% down. Like, just let it ride. It's the good feeling.
Yeah, that's interesting. How does that feel though? Getting, 90% down. Is that where it's at right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like when you said, yeah, like that, I could just like see it in you. Like, for me, I would obviously, thankfully you've got some money off the table and it's great you did that deal that way, but how does that feel, like having it at that low? Of something that you loved and built your baby, seeing it go to the place that it is.
Yeah, it's definitely when I see things, that happen, and I'm like, it's definitely hard to let go because it becomes something of, it was such, it was Tani and I's baby. We would defend if someone, would say something bad. I would be on social, on the Culture Kings account, ripping into them, going straight back at them. And for me, it was like, this is how passionate and more like, if a staff member, say we were walked back in and had like a Foot Locker bag or something, I would look at them like, you're fucking dead to me. Right. It was like, how dare you trade you, because I was so passionate and so every ounce of protecting and nourishing this baby, this brand. And I always believed in that, learning from Bernard Arnault, LVMH, brands that earned in drips and lost in buckets, and being so protective of everything, being this is a drip that's building it, and being so careful not to pour out the bucket on brand. And I do get is that, and that was a really hard thing for me to deal with, is because once I couldn't control that brand, and parts where I'm like, no, this is pouring out the bucket, but into chase a number and doing it, I just didn't like it. But it's still, it is a thing. I don't think founders talk about it as much, but it is like, and part of that when you do sell, it's that bit of like, you feel a bit, have I sold my sort of soul, in that it was this thing you put all you've got all this money, but I do sort of see it's just part of the journey, and it's part of that evolving and growing, that I realized that I had to grow as myself. I didn't want to be everything Simon and Tani Culture Kings, where I was always sort of felt like, for me, it was like the LVMH, the bigger than that.
I'm getting this sense and this tingle in me. And so I have to ask you this question. Apple, Steve Jobs stepped away from Apple and it went to shit, and then he stepped back in and brought it back to life. Do you ever see yourself standing in front of the steering wheel of Culture Kings again?
Like, my thing is, as an entrepreneur, and I think this was always at my core, I'm an entrepreneur, and that's that. I love to bet. I love to back myself. I love to take risk. Everything's for sale at a price. And this is both ways, right? Everything's for sale. Like the same way I sold it, I wouldn't have sold it if it wasn't the price. And I think that's an important thing where you've got to, if someone's, but I do sort of see, there's no telling in the future or something if that was ever an opportunity, but definitely not now. It's not something I do really want to lean into this mass e-com army resurgence that I know that's coming, of that so many brands can get it. And this is where I think they can take from the corporates, is that there's just this mass long tail of niche brands that can be carved out. And I think that's where, all these people saying we're going to lose all these jobs to AI. I think the big thing it's going to mess up is this, like there's going to be the super massive, like the Microsoft and Google and Apple that have that will continue to go, just like we've seen that with S&P. But these corporate dinosaur ones in the middle, they're the ones that are going to get slayed, and they're going to get by all these niche that can get to 10 million to 50 million with 5-10 people that can build and build. That's what I sort of see as this. And you can train these sort of skill sets to work across multiple parts. This traditional way of having a merchandise team and a marketing team, I think you could just scrap that whole structure, and it's more this flywheel that I sort of see it. That's what I'm really passionate about now, and I love to help. I love to see entrepreneurs, just like myself, that was like battling away, working the 100-hour weeks, hoping that one day it would pay off, and wonder, like, to show them just like, keep going, it's worth it. Like the opportunity's there, and give them that hope and possibility. That's what I'm really passionate about. I love seeing them, and it's sort of great. I've been down the road, I can just see the pattern straight away. Like, oh, just fix this, do this. Straight away makes an impact. Yeah.
Yeah. I see it in you. It's great. And one of the things that I really inspired by you, and just what draws me so much to your content online, and why I think you're going to absolutely blow up is it's unique. It's not regurgitated Alex Hormozy like every other person talking about business. And you listen to your content and you know your shit. You don't even need to, like, all the subliminal stuff that you do that makes instills credibility is like, I love how strategic and it played everything you do is like walking around the house while you're filming, having that watch on in the frame, having the shoes in the background, the Culture King's little subliminal exit stuff. But even if you stripped away all of that, you listen to what you're saying and you go, I've not heard that before. And that's how I know that you're proper legit. Because if you listen to some people that don't do the flashy stuff, but they just say something that Hormozy said, which is basically literally everyone in business right now talking about just lessons that they've learned from his books. I know your credibility even without seeing it. So that's what really inspires me. And I think a massive motivator for me in terms of growing my voice to become a trusted voice is having unique insights, like the importance of being able to just not be something, be able to listen to something and someone go, and you go, I haven't heard that before. That's new. And time again, I just see your videos online, your content, and, you might be talking for like 3 minutes on a video on YouTube Reels, which Instagram Reels, which is kind of against the algorithm, but it just is so valuable. And I just look at it and go like, that is so much value and it's so dense. Where do you want to take that content? And you've obviously investing so much into personal brand, into your social media right now. Is there a goal for that? Is there a ceiling or?
So I suppose for me, going through the private equity process is that I had a lot of fun in it, and I was like, oh, I would love to be on the other side of this, buying businesses, working out how to create value, working out the deal. I always thought, I was told Tony when we're going through it, I'm like, I can see us when we're older, we're going to have this big private equity firm, and I'm just going to do this because it's going to be so much fun. Like post Culture Kings, I always said that. And I felt though, going through it is like, I really felt watching Alex Hormozy, I'm like, he is onto it, is that the problem with so private equity, if you look over the last 30 years, it's the highest returning asset class, averaging like 16%, way smoking, S&P 500, real estate, everything. And these private equity firms have grown so huge. But I believe, just like we thought at the start, remember when people were, oh, you'll never be able to sell a house on social media, you'll never be able to sell a car on social media or a $5,000 dress. It's all happened and gone. I'm like, there is no reason you won't be able to invest in a private equity firm on social media. And I think rather than be these faceless firms, which they all are, so secretive, so behind, and even the way, so as soon as you've got a business with any size, they all start reaching out to you, they're juniors, just spamming you, and they try and get as much information as possible. They want P&L, and it's very intimidating. Like, you don't want to give that out, especially I know for myself, like, man, I'd never even show anyone my P&L. Why am I just going to send this to and it's this really hard to gather trust. And that is, when you don't have trust, it's so slow, the process, where I sort of felt, I'm going to give out all the information. I'm going to tell you exactly everything I know and everything. And as I'm learning in real time, as I'm learning AI now, this is how I'm utilizing it, everything exactly how I think about it, in order that I believe there'll be a huge amount of like these e-commerce retail founders that get to the point in years to come, and that if they've watched my content for a few years, they've got this trust. And I was just saying, like, if you listen to like 20 hours or 30 hours of someone's content, it's like you know them. That is the amazing part. Like, you don't actually listen to your mates for 30 hours, really, if you think for, sometimes a year. And this is the breakthrough I really had, is like, I know when I'd met some of those people that I'd listened to all their content and stuff over the years, that you can build so much more trust straight away. You can build so much more of an authentic relationship, that I can be so easy. Oh, founders wanting to, I'm buying these sort of businesses and rolling them up. This is what we're going to do. We're going to add this value effect. You're going to get money off the table, which means the FU money, you never get to work again. You never have to work. You do it because you love it, and more align the partners on the long journey. And, whether we scale and be like LVMH, which is really a private equity firm that just never sold, it's, or whether we want to take on outside capital, the same way I think Hormozi now, if he was like, hey, I'm starting a fund, swipe up to invest, I'd chuck a few $1 million in on a swipe up. How much could he raise? It would be crazy, but that is the future. And I believe that's why I wanted to start my personal brand. And I just feel there's so much, like you would be aware, it's like, it's a bit, almost overwhelming, that deal flow and stuff that already comes through it. But I just feel as I can build that machine and talent as well to hire the right people. It's just amazing in some of the ones where I've just been able to swipe up and they've come in and they're almost, a little bit pre-trained. They understand a lot of the stuff you've been talking about. Yeah, it's the most insane trust ever, because they're, as you said, like they're listening to you more than they speak to their best friends. People will come up randomly on the street and they start talking about things that I've documented months ago, and it's just stuck in their brain. And you just go, all of a sudden they feel like they know you. They're talking to you like they know you. And it's like a bit of a surreal thing for them, whereas you've never seen them in your life. Yeah. And that power in itself is like last year when my social media really started to take off, I just look at it and I go, I had 300 followers on the 1st of June last year. And then by the end of June, I had over 100,000. And then by the end of July, I had over 300,000. And then by November, I had over 800,000 across Instagram and TikTok. And you look at it and go, that's not a lot of time. But if you're posting 2 videos every single day like I was, and people are tuning into you every single day, then you run into them after them consuming you for 6 months every single day. And it's literally like you're their best mate. Yeah. They ask you all these questions. They're bubbly. They're energetic. They're a little bit nervous, but they know you. They look up to you. Yeah. And I just look at where you're going with your stuff, and you tie in the audience and the credibility in terms of what you've got in terms of like your successes in business. It's like ultimate trust, and that's exactly what Hormozi has right now. Yeah. You literally look at what Hormozi's done, and with acquisition.com. He gets thousands of businesses inquiring every week or whatever it is. Yeah. And he just has the pick of whatever he wants. He could buy into any company, would give up equity to Alex Hormozi. Yeah. Because there's that trust. He's got the audience. Everyone loves what he says, and he's done it. Yeah. And he's got the success stories like yourself. Yeah. I really feel it's like the blueprint, and especially what he's like, if you even see that uplift on school and stuff straight away on the Massive. Google Trends, it's like, wow. It's just the hardest thing would be picking and choosing, from that part. There's just so much choice, but that's the best part, is they're giving all the information. You can rank it. You can see where's the best fit. And, I really do see it as, and for mine, I'm doing the same. Like, I'm not trying to sell anything, or there's no kickback or something. It's just to give as much of that real life experience and learning, and I suppose that's why you've got to put some of that credibility stuff in there, because I just didn't want it to get drowned out with someone that's got 100%. Loop them into some. I think it's the smartest. The credibility's a no-brainer, and I love how subtly you do it. That's what I was saying. Just like having the watch in the frame, and it's like having your hand like this, just so it's there. Little things, and I look at it and go, people that don't know social media
like they're not going to hone in and be like, oh, he's just trying to flash, but they're going to see it and subconsciously they're going to think, okay, credible. He knows what he's talking about. He's been around the block.
Yeah.
The house, just walking around a resort every day and posting it. It's so special. All right, we've got to stop the show right there. And I am kicking myself that I have to say this to you guys, but the remaining 20 minutes that we did record with Simon Beard has actually had some problems. The audio cut out and the backup audio was not clear enough in the slightest, given how windy the environment was that we were in Simon's beautiful home. And I'm kicking myself, as I said, that we can't release this because, to be honest, it was my favorite part. But the good news is we did get a whole hour of amazing wisdom from Simon, and I learned so much from that episode, and I really hope you guys did too. But unfortunately, the last 20 minutes is out of action, and I would much rather you guys be left wanting more than disappointed from such a poor audio experience that you guys would have experienced if I included the last 20 minutes of this conversation. And that concludes the episode with Simon Beard. I hope you guys got a lot of A from that, because I certainly did. Simon's story is so inspiring. I am so motivated and so inspired to chase after my dreams after that podcast. So I hope you guys got some value from that as well. His story, from a market stall to all the way up to a $600 million company, getting paid $300 million in cash and being able to say to his wife, babe, there's no budget on the home. Build what you want. It's pretty inspiring for me to hear that sort of stuff, because that's certainly something that I want to strive towards. But that does conclude the episode. If you do want to get Simon back on the pocket, because I have so many more questions that I want to ask, and I have so many more questions that I want answered from the man himself, Simon, because his depth of wisdom is something we can all take something away from. So if you do want him back on the show, then be sure to let me know and we can try and make that happen again for a part 2. But that concludes the show. If you are new here, or if you have enjoyed this episode with Simon Beard, please be sure to hit that subscribe button if you are watching it on YouTube, or follow The Pocket on Spotify or Apple and leave us a good review if you did enjoy it. It would be greatly appreciated. It helps the show grow, but it also helps us keep getting amazing guests like Simon on this show, so we can keep providing amazing conversations for you guys to grow and learn alongside me. But without further ado, that concludes the show, and stay tuned for next week for another awesome episode of The Pocket. I'll see you guys next week.